Tart dough for our fruit tart. We're using basically a sugar dough that was made. We're going to be making, I think it's an 8-inch tart. So I'm starting off with approximately 8 ounces of dough. Now this dough has been in the refrigerator. I've let it sit out for a little bit just to kind of get it more to a more easily moldable consistency to it. If you try to roll the dough that's straight out of the refrigerator, it'll just crack really bad. And I didn't really knead it too much together. All I'm doing is just kind of rolling it in my hand, rolling forward, and what that's doing is it's bringing it together to where I'm not getting any cracks on the outside of the dough. Trying to equalize the temperature a little bit because certain parts were colder than others, but that should be okay. Now, tart doughs or any of the sugar doughs that you're going to be rolling out for tarts, generally speaking, they're going to be quite a bit softer. They're going to be a little bit more difficult to work with. They're a little bit sticky, and they almost have to be pretty cold to work with. So now that I've got it kind of flattened out in more or less a round disc shape, I'm going to go ahead and roll that, put a little bit of flour on top, put a little more flour underneath, because you don't want this to stick to the table, because it will, and then it's very difficult to get off, and then you're having to piece it together, and you don't want to have to do that. So to roll, I'm basically putting the rolling pin in the center. I'm rolling forward, I'm coming back to the center, and I'm pulling back. I'm keeping this dough moving on the table. I'm trying to keep it floured really well because you don't want it to stick to the table at all. And just keep rolling it out. Keeping it moving on the table. Whichever shape it's kind of going into, you can kind of see which way you need to roll it to keep it relatively round. For whatever reason, I start off with something round and it always ends up somewhat square, but I do the best I can. Now, the doughs for the tart doughs need to be fairly thin, about 1/8 of an inch thick. I think that's a good consistency or a good thickness on this. Now, this dough is very soft. It's very difficult to pick up. So usually what I do is I will take a smaller PVC pipe, and I'll go ahead and roll that very lightly, very gently around it to pick this dough up, because it can be very difficult to pick up. Now, since your tart dough or your tart shell has very sharp edges on the outside, as you're laying this on top, keep it above. Don't press it down until you're ready to start to cut the dough. Roll it on very gently, very carefully. And now what I do is I'm very carefully going to be picking up this dough and kind of pressing it into the corner of the tart pan. Depending on your dough, and depending on the temperature of the dough, this can be a little bit tricky. It can be a little bit soft, and it may tear a little bit, and that's okay. We can kind of repair that. Little repairs are not a problem. But I'm gently picking up the dough and pressing it into the corner. You want to make sure that there's no air bubbles on the bottom of your tart, and that you've got it more or less pressed or into the corner of the tart pan. And then to cut it, as opposed to using my wooden rolling pin, I use the PVC pipe, because I'm not really worried about ruining the PVC pipe, whereas the rolling pin, wood really gets cut really easily. Okay, remove the dough, and then I will just kind of go around and gently press that dough into the side of the tart pan. And there we have it, one lovely tart. When I pick this tart up, be careful and pick it up by the outside and not the center, because it has a false bottom. It's going into the refrigerator. It's going to relax for about 30 minutes, kind of chill up a little bit, and then I'm going to do the blind baking on this tart shell, because we're doing a pastry cream and then we're filling it with fresh fruit. Blind baking of a tart shell. To finish this off, I rolled this out using bread flour. I've let it relax in the refrigerator for about a half hour just to get it nice and chilled. And now I'm going to blind bake the tart shell. Many times a lot of recipes will say, dock the dough. I generally do not. You can make your own decision on that. But I'm going to use a piece of parchment paper. I'm going to lay that over the top of the dough. I'm going to press it inside. And then as my weight, I'm going to use my dried rice. Now the rice, I want to push up against the side of the tart pan. And the reason I do that, since the tart pans are more or less straight up and down, I want to keep the tart dough from sliding inside the tart pan. This kind of helps hold it up until the structure is set. I put this in an oven at 400 degrees for approximately 10 minutes till the outside of the dough starts to brown. Once the outside of the dough starts to brown, the structure's set, I can go ahead and pull the beans out and continue baking it until it's completely done. It's been about 10 minutes, maybe a little longer. What I'm looking for in the tart, before you pull the beans or the rice or whatever you have to have in there as weights, I'm looking for the outside to start to brown just a little bit. That way the structure of the outside is set and it's not going to fall into the actual tart pan itself. So now I have to return it back to the oven to finish browning this to a nice, beautiful golden brown. We started blind baking the tart shell. I have now finished. It's now cool. Maybe a little overdone, but still okay. Not too far gone. So to make our fruit tart, I'm going to fill it with a little bit of chocolate pastry cream that we made the other day. So I'm going to put a little bit of chocolate pastry cream in there. Now when you're putting the pastry cream in a tart shell to make a fruit tart, I never want to fill it much more than halfway because you kind of need that little bit of a lip on the outside of the tart shell to keep the fruit contained. When you go to cut this tart, if the fruits are all way up top, it makes it very difficult to cut. So you want that little bit of a lip so you can actually cut the fruit, cut through the fruit. Okay, so now that I have the pastry cream in there, what we're left with now is to put the fruit on in a decorative fashion. Fruit can go into the fruit tart in any way that you feel necessary. Anything that looks attractive to you, and it really kind of comes down to your own interpretation of what looks nice. I've gone ahead and sliced up some strawberries. I've got some blueberries, I've got some raspberries, and I've got some mandarin oranges. What you're looking for in your fruit tarts is a variation on color. I like to use as many different colors as I can in my fruit tart, unless you're doing something very specific, say a strawberry tart, and then you'd stick with just one fruit. But we're just going to stick with a variety of fruits. Now I've gone ahead and pre-sliced my strawberries. That way I can lay them around the tart. There's many ways you can set this up. It's all up to your own imagination on how you want it to look. Get those laid in there. Some lovely little mandarin orange sections. You can use fresh orange segments if you want. These just happen to be used quite frequently on fruit tarts because they're readily available and you can get them just about year round. Gives you a nice color, and the flavor more or less is going to be consistent. Put a few blueberries on there and call it done. Now the glaze that I'm going to be putting on this, normally in most commercial kitchens they have an apricot glaze or a fruit glaze that they use. I've made the fruit glaze out of the book. It's in the rich dough section. It's just basically water, corn syrup, and sugar. But it's just simply a clear glaze that is made. And usually you'll use this fruit glaze to keep the fruit tarts looking attractive. To glaze a fruit tart, I generally take the brush and you want to get it down into the pot, and you just want to lightly tap on the fruits. And what this does is this actually coats the fruits with that beautiful glaze, keeps them looking like they're very fresh, very wet. This will also add a little bit of shelf life to your fruit tarts and make them look prettier for a longer period of time. Now once this glaze chills, it will thicken up to a certain extent so where you can actually cut the fruit and it'll kind of help hold the fruit onto the tart.